Chester Guthrie.
Now, which one's he?
He works at Lowe's. Kind of an older gentleman. I know since you do a lot of construction. May have seen him around, but
Now, which Guthrie? There's a lot of Guthries in Cleveland.
the Guthries that I'm involved or that I'm related to are the Guthries who own the farm property that is now I-75 and we're Hardee's, and we did not own.
Oh, Frank.
Yep, Frank Guthrie. You probably know
I know Frank.
Yep, you know my granddad.
And he has a brother?
Yep.
What was his brother?
His name was my great uncle Fred, and then you had my great uncle Daryl. I know my great uncle Fred. He passed away in.
Now, they lived on Mouse Creek Road?
Yep.
Still live there?
Oh, no, well, not now. I mean, now that my grandfather has remarried. Granted, he got remarried back in 2011, but he wound up remarrying Reba. I forgot what Reba's last name is, but anyway, he built a house and they moved out to. Not the Old Fort area, but out in the countryside. I'm trying to think what
they had all that property on I-75.
Yep, it was dirt cheap, worth nothing until the government came through and said like, "Hey, we're building I-75."
Yeah, that Valley Head Road used to go all the way to Frontage Road.
Yep, and that's one of the cool things about it. If you notice,
and it used to go under the interstate.
Yep. I mean, it was so interesting. A second.
I bought a piece of property over there, and one Saturday afternoon, there was a knock at the window, and I looked out the window, and it was Frank, and he was wanting me to pay the property taxes. He had just gotten his property taxes notice in the mail, and I guess it was settled at closing, but he was wanting to make sure.
Yep, that sounds like my granddad.
So that was your grandfather?
Frank. Well, might be because there was my grandfather Frank James F. Guthrie, and then there was Franklin Asbury Guthrie, who was my great grandfather.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think who he might like. It was around the 1980s, around that time. Mm-hmm. I know my great grandfather passed away in 1984, I think it was. But I just remember because my dad had just graduated from college, and that's when he passed. Oh. But my grandfather was pretty much named after my great-grandfather, Frank, James Frank. I'm trying to think what would probably be a good, or kind of like a good, what's the word? Well, yeah, it probably was my grandfather. But anyway, well, where was I going with that thought?
Where were you raised?
Born and raised in Cleveland.
Which end?
This side of Cleveland. Originally, I was raised. No. My childhood home was on Mouse Creek Road. Kind of like right directly next to Mouse Creek, or down. Pardon me. To the soccer complex. Our house was like right across the street from it.
Saddle Creek subdivision?
Single tree.
Single tree, yeah.
Single tree. The single
goes
tree.
up and go left or right.
Yep. It's basically just one big giant bone. You can go this way, then you go that way, and it pops out.
Yeah.
But from there, my mom and my dad, we did move to Woodbury Drive, which is out in the county. But parents separated, 2007. And, my dad still lives there in the same house, and I live on this side of Cleveland. I actually only live like 4 minutes away from this property.
Is that right?
Yep.
Now I saw where you had went sailing for a while.
Yep.
What was that? How do you get from Cleveland, Tennessee to when you were going to go sail for what? Like a long trip, right?
Yep. How that started is after I'd graduated from the University of Tennessee back in 2018, I wasn't really having any luck within my career field.
Which is what?
Journalism, electronic media. But I mean, it just became so hard that I really couldn't take it anymore. And I ended up coming back to Cleveland. And in about a 2-3 month span, I was thinking, where do I want to go next with my life? What do I want to do now that I'm done with my education? So I sat there and I thought, why don't I do what my stepfather did before he met my mother? I am going to buy a sailboat and move to Florida for a year, 2 years, possibly maybe even 3 at that time. I really didn't know. And the initial goal was to vlog every single day of my life for an entire year. And if y'all don't know, vlogging is, filming, your life, your daily roundabouts, where you're going, where you're coming.
But why a boat?
Because, for one, it's cheap. The other, it is the adventure, knowing that you live right out by the sea. There is nothing that can stop you from doing anything. And really, it's just, I guess it was really just a dream, because
Do you know how to sail?
a little bit. I mean, I wish I had just done it a little bit more than I had, but I mean, I loved it, and I still own that boat too. It's still moored in Jacksonville. I still send my money, my moor rent, every month. Pretty much, I can go to Florida when I want to at this point.
So is it a sailboat or a houseboat?
Sailboat. It is a
But you can sleep on it?
Yep. It has electricity. I mean, it is virtually what I call a tiny house on steroids.
So you go underneath and...
Yep. It's got 6'1" headroom. It's got a shower. It's got a V-berth, which is layman's terms for a bed. It's got a freezer. It's got a TV. And it's even got kind of like a living room kind of area. Now, granted, it's a 30-foot boat, but everything is so compact.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it was just grand. Especially, this was one of my favorite things about doing this life journey of mine. Sometimes, like during the warmer months, when manatees would migrate, I would wake up in the middle of the morning before work, and I would see these big, giant sea cows just grazing, swimming up by the boat, eating, then disappearing.
What work did you do?
When I first got down there, I initially just worked at a fast food restaurant just to really get myself anchored, just to have something. It's in the spur of the moment. I have something to work with. The goal was to get a job working with something journalism related, because Jacksonville, Florida is a very big market for that. And in that 3 years, not much happened. Although I did take up another goal. Well, not another goal, but another job. I ended up working in the quick lube industry. Doing oil changes. Working on cars, taking belts out, putting them back in, rotating tires. Which honestly, that was a really, really great decision on my end, because not only do these types of businesses, they have insurance, they've got dental, vision, health insurance, and plus they do pay really good too, although it is not where I wanted to be, but in terms of jobs, that's what I did.
Well, wasn't that a big undertaking to leave Cleveland and go buy a boat to sail with no real experience in that?
Yes, it was a very, very hard. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, the closest family that I had in Florida was my great uncle Daryl, who lived all the way in Brandon, Florida. And that's about a 5-hour drive from Jacksonville to Brandon, Florida. But yes, it was very hard. I really didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I just kind of, looked to it and I said, God, I'm going to make this decision, and I'm going to grab life by the horns, and this is where I'm going. This is my dream, and I will make it happen. But in terms of like that, where was I going with that thought? But yeah, that's really about, it's just that, I pushed myself to my limits. And quite honestly, if it had not been for the pandemic, I probably would have stayed there longer. But because of everything shutting down, me being there by myself, it freaked me out. I'm not going to lie.
Did you lose your job during that period or whatever?
My hours got cut back so bad, I was only working like maybe, I'm guessing like no more than 20 hours every 2 weeks.
We're talking 2 years ago, roughly.
Yep. I mean, it was total chaos. I mean, my mental health wasn't doing good. I wasn't getting any sleep. And I lost, well, I won't say I lost. Briefly, I lost the passion that I had come to Florida for, which was to vlog. And there was a very brief time that I didn't vlog for quite a while. I mean, well, I won't say quite. I'd probably say my vlogging stopped for about 4 months. I didn't pick up a camera. I just said, you know what, I want to go home. But part of me said, no, I'm going to stick this out and I will do this. And that's what I did. I made it stick. And if I hadn't had some other medical issues that had come up, I probably would have come back I probably would have stayed longer. That's very interesting. Actually, this is another job that I did pick up on, which I think is very fun, which we will be talking about today, I imagine. But I used to give ghost tours in the city of St. Augustine, the oldest city in the United States.
When you were there?
Yep.
Now, how did you arrive at that job? Because we're talking about 2018 you went down there?
Yep, 2018, 19 roughly.
Which is not long in the big scheme of things.
Yep.
That was yesterday.
Yep. How I got involved with Ghost Augustine is I was working on this documentary. I was trying to...
Your own documentary?
Yep. A documentary that would encompass the lesser-known ghost stories of St. Augustine. Because St. Augustine, not only is it the oldest city in America, it is also one of the most documented in terms of like hauntings, hauntings, spirits, ghosts, demons, whatever you want to call them. But it, what I wanted to cover was the stories that no one really heard of or really heard about. It just kind of like hid. But one of the things that I was doing, I was trying to gain support from these businesses, financial support, such as, advertisement, showing them, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what you'll get. But ultimately, that fell through, and one of the things that I was doing is I wanted to do a story on Ghost Augustine's the haunted hearse that they had. It was an old hearse from 1993. I forgot what the name of the spirit was, but anyway, he had had a heart attack and he had passed away in the vehicle. And how the people of Ghost Augustine found out about this is when they would drive the tourists around telling ghost stories, weird things would begin to happen in this hearse. The radio would turn on by itself. Some people have said that they would see a shadow sitting right behind them. Just a lot of things until finally they brought in a medium who sat in the car and they're like, yeah, his name is, I believe his name was, or Frank. I believe his name was either Frank or James. But anyway, it was the freakiest thing. But to go back to what I was talking about, I went to the manager of the shop and I asked him about this because I couldn't get a hold of the owner, to sign off on the paperwork saying that, we could do this story. And I talked with the manager for about 30 minutes and he pulls out, he's like, 1 second, goes in, pulls out an application. He says, here you go, I think you might like this. And that is how I got started at Ghost Augustine. I went in trying to get some information and paperwork done for my documentary. I came out with the job application. And I will say that was probably one of the most fun jobs I've ever had. But when it is an investigative-based tour and you are dealing with some of these types of spirits, sometimes they will follow you home. And that's one of the things that made me quit, is because weird things would begin to happen on the boat and on the job site. And eventually I just said, too many things are happening. I need to quit, which of course I did. And not long after that, I came back to Cleveland.
About when?
I came back to Cleveland September of this year. I felt like 2 years and 4 months was enough to solidify that I had achieved my dream. But
now, since then, you have started online the Dream Poet.
Yep.
Which I have noticed you have an large amount of subscribers and followers, and that is very hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
So September is only.
You've
not been here.
About 2.5 months. 2 months.
How many videos do you have out now?
In terms of like everything I've done.
Yeah, I've just started seeing them pop up everywhere. They're really good.
Thank you, sir. I would probably say I have close to about 500 videos.
All done when? In what time frame?
Well, the first 339 videos were my vlogs that I did for almost an entire year before the pandemic happened.
Where at?
In Florida.
In Florida.
And when I came back, I kind of said to myself, well, after my hiatus that I had taken, it's like, I'm just going to stick to one video a week, because doing one video a day is just hard. So that's what I would do. I'd vlog one, on my off days from work, working at Take 5 Oil Change. I would go out, I would travel to these parts of Florida that the tourists never visit, such as Silver Springs. If you have a chance, Silver Springs is one of the most beautiful areas. It will take you to another realm. Like, I'm talking like the water is so crystal clear you could look 40 feet down and you can see straight to the bottom.
So you don't do vlogs, as you call them, and I call them videos. You don't do them of just around here?
I do them quite well. Since I have noticed that a lot of my subscriber base, a lot of, my local client, well, maybe the word isn't clients, maybe my fans, as I put them, I've noticed that a lot of it has been focused here in Cleveland, and that's what I've been doing for most of my vlogs. Some of the things that I have been doing in this area, back in October, I did, some of the, the local haunts, the ghost stories, that are just known around this area, like, the monk of Charleston.
The monk of Charleston. Was that true, you think?
Honestly, there is some, well, I won't say some, there's a lot of historical facts that point in the direction that this doctor actually did it.
I mean, there was actually a train wreck, right? That's documented.
Yep.
100 deaths.
Yep, and...
that's an interesting thing you said. You seem to do the things that nobody else is doing.
Yep.
A sailboat, riding a sailboat from Cleveland.
Yep.
And doing a different way of journalism.
Yep.
I mean, it's not like you went to work for somebody to do journalism. But the monk, that was what, 1860 or 80, 70?
Pardon me. 1867 is when the train wreck happened.
And I never knew about that till I saw your video.
Yep.
And I can go by there now and I can see buildings that I think, oh, I see.
Yep. Because, well...
Now, how did you find out about this?
How I found out about the monk goes all the way back to a story that my mother read to me as a child. The book was called 13 Ghosts and Jeffrey, which talks about, of course, a monk coming down from Baltimore, Maryland to New Orleans. The railroads ran, through Tennessee, ran straight down there. But of course, the monk, story goes that, he was wounded, and the doctor took him in, and nobody saw the monk, and he was neither recorded as being either dead or alive until, well, this is where some records kind of become kind of iffy. Some records say that the skeleton was in the doctor's office.
Because that was a rite of passage for doctors at the time. They had to have a skeleton up, right?
Yep. Or some say, they found the skeleton in, the doctor's old home in an estate sale.
Or, well, remnants of the body in the bathtub, right?
Yep. And again, the bathtub on that. Again, how I found out about that was through Miranda Young, who runs Ghost Biker Explorations, another YouTube channel. I believe she's from the area because I've noticed that a lot of her videos will start out in a lot of Cleveland locale spots, kind of like Fletcher Park or Red Clay. I'm like, that's a dead giveaway, cause anyhow,
now where do you get the information? Do you search for it?
Mm-hmm. How I usually find out about it is I will go through various other YouTube channels. I will find books on it. I'll read online sources. And, I will pinpoint the location of this area. Some of these locations, they're not even on a map. You actually have to dig for them. Like one of the things that actually I did just recently, it was a video that dropped this morning, was of McFarland, Tennessee.
I saw that. I watched that about 6:30 this morning.
Anyway, because, McFarland, it was a railroad town that was established in 1895. But, because TVA bought up all that land, they were taking over, not even within 30 years, McFarland, Tennessee just disappeared off the map. And, you go to that spot, like on the outskirts of town, or what was once McFarland, you have, the foundation of the concrete pouring facility. And if you look at like old photos of it, the thing stands probably about 200 feet high. It is tall.
And when I looked at the video, it looked like it was like 30 feet tall.
Yep. I mean, the thing was like it was a ginormous building. Like.
But the whole building, or what was the foundation? Was it about 30 feet or what?
I would have to say, I'm guessing it had to be at least maybe 80, 90 feet. I mean, if you look
Golly.
you got to think, back then. That's what, humanity was capable of, what kind of things we could build.
And how did they get the concrete up there and all that stuff?
That kind of baffles me because, honestly, if you look at it, what they were getting the concrete for was, for the Appalachian Dam. Well, not the Appalachian Dam, the Appalachia Powerhouse. Let me correct myself there, because the Appalachia Powerhouse, it was being built during, World War II, and it was needed for the war effort. The government was needing power to, smelt aluminum, smelt iron, steel to make weapons, all that stuff. But it just honestly, it makes me wonder, how did they get that much material down the mountain? Because if you've ever been to McFarland, it is in the most remote part of the Cherokee National Forest. There is nothing there, and there is no telephone service.
Now, is McFarland, was it in Tennessee or North Carolina? It was in Tennessee.
Tennessee. Tennessee, there are two ways that you can get up there. The first way is through Turtletown. That's probably the way that I consider the safe way, because you don't have to deal with all the bumpiness that my truck luckily survived. That was not a fun trip. Well, it was a fun trip. Let me correct myself. But then there's another way going through Cleveland. You'll go through Reliance, kind of like you're going to Hiwassee Outfitters, and you'll take that route.
To the left?
Yep.
In front of Webb Store?
Yep, and I mean, it's like a lot of bumpiness, and for the next 45 minutes, that's all you're going to see is dirt road and bumpiness. But
so it was a city, and you said it had a post office and one house and a hotel?
Yep, they called it the Government House. The reason why they called it the Government House was because it's where most of the park rangers in that area would sleep. And that was most of their clientele, was park rangers.
Now, it was different than Caney Creek.
Yep.
In the fact that they didn't need that much help.
Yep. because, Caney Creek, that was again, it was established by the East Tennessee Power Company, which later evolved, within about maybe 30, 40 years, was merged with TVA. But originally it was, 16 homes.
I had Doc Garner, Doc German on.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
I remember that
the second
one.
living survivor of the Caney Creek.
Yep.
But that was a similar thing. Can you imagine being the one person living in that house? Wonder who lived in the house at McFarland.
I mean, that's another one of those things that just makes you wonder. That's lost to time.
Where did you get those pictures? Because it had like 4 or 5.
How I got them is first I looked up Google Images, then I went to the sites just to make sure that that was the town, and I took them, I saved them, and from there I built it, but that's kind of like how I got the photos. And again, that's kind of one of the things that I do with my videos, especially the historical ones. I try my best to go back and find the photo that is, this is it.
That you know is it.
Yep. But that's kind of how I go about doing that. But
Now, there's nobody that can really fact check your videos.
yep,
So you're doing some assumptions, obviously, right?
some.
But you're doing the least you possibly. You had to. I noticed on the one about the monk, you had to connect the dots somehow.
Yep.
Because you said at the end, you was wondering if he was buried, if the bones were buried across, which
Yep.
would have been the most reasonable thing
Yep.
that you could do with him, if you were. Now, what was the doctor at the time? What was his name?
His name was Dr. Bazemore. I guess why I've kind of been kind of iffy because I just have heard that there are family members of the Bazemore family that are still around, and I'm not sure how they would feel about that old tale, that their great grandfather took a monk who was dead, and he pulled off the all the meat off the bones in the tub.
Well, maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it's somebody else.
Could be.
Yeah. So these videos, you make no money off of it, right?
As of right now, no. In order to claim monetization through YouTube, through AdSense, you have to acquire about 4,000 hours of watch time as well as about 1,000 subscribers. As of right now, I have the watch time, but I'm about 500 subscribers short of reaching that goal. But
How many subscribers short?
about 500, and last I checked this morning, my YouTube channel had about 448. I'm guessing about 560 subs is what I lack.
They're hard to get.
Yes, very hard, because it's like, sometimes, like what I have noticed, I will post to a few of these Facebook groups, like Cleveland and, Cleveland and Tennessee history.
Yeah.
I've noticed, they're very open and generally very positive. Although you will sometimes get that one person in the comment section that will tell you like, oh, his voice is horrible. He needs somebody else to do the video. And he's like, you sounded like you was drunk or in death. And I'm like, why?
Yeah. Yeah. Why comment that?
Yeah, I mean, there's no need for it. It's like, I'm working my fingers to the bone on my YouTube channel. But in terms of like money, this is the plan. Once I reach 500 subscribers, I will open up a Patreon. That way, if people just want to make, like a $1 donation or a $5 donation, just to buy lunch, maybe I can send them a postcard, or something as a way of saying thank you. Just something like that, as a way of saying thanks.
It is a really good thing you're doing because you're pulling out stories about our area, about our history, that's not that long ago.
Yep.
100 years or less, that we don't know unless we was to go search the newspaper microfilm.
Yep.
And some of this stuff you're pulling out wouldn't even been in the paper anyway.
Nope. And that's the thing, it's like, kind of one of the things that I'm also looking at right now about doing a video on is the old primitive settlement, that's out on Highway 64.
That would be a good one.
I mean, because it's like, Cleveland Daily Banner isn't really touching it, Mix, 104.1 isn't touching it, and it's like, that is such a significant piece of history. If you think about it, we had our very own Museum of the Appalachians in our very own backyard. And it hadn't been for the owners of the property, I believe the owner, I think he passed away from a stroke, and his wife couldn't really take it up, and eventually it just fell to the wayside.
What was the primitive settlement?
The old primitive settlement was a 19th century recreation of what, Cleveland probably would have looked at, like in Appalachian times. Old log cabins that were original, log cabins that had been pulled sometimes from about 50 miles away, and all of them single, meticulously put back together. And one of those homes that was put back together, that was the old primitive settlement, there were about 13 children raised in that home. And from what I read in an article in 2003, you would have these family members come to the home that they were raised in and getting to see it, the future generations getting to witness it. Like, to me, that is beautiful. However, present day, it's on sale in the market. Last time it was sold was for about $250,000.
I don't even know if there's anything left there, is there?
There are a few buildings.
Who did the primitive settlement? Who took on that as a job? Because when I was growing up, it was a bar.
Okay.
Or a dance hall.
Dance hall. Actually, I remember I remember my uncle telling me about that too, Donald McCoy. But anyway, I forgot their names. I do know that they did own a very prominent furniture company here in Cleveland, and that was one of their things that they wanted to do. But I really wish I could think of what their names were. It's off the top of my head. But they...
I know who you're talking about, and I can't think it. Well, it's not McCracken, is it?
I don't think it's McCracken, no. But some of the things that are left over is you have the original building that was the dance hall. Then you have a really, really old log cabin, that's, of course, built into it. On the property, you also had an old... granted, they since then have moved this, but it was an old post office, like a 2-room post office. Mm-hmm. Everything was still in there. $3,000 is what they sold it for. Which, honestly, I really wish that it could have been me to buy that, just because the building was so fascinating and it was so cheap.
What is it about history? Are you more into the history or the mystery?
Gosh, I want to say that's a double-sided answer, because it's like I do love history and I love mysteries, some things that people can't figure out because the answer has been lost, or it's so, the answer is so ambiguous that you have to just dig for it. And I would probably say more of the mystery behind it. What is it? Because that's one of the reasons why I did the old Civil War tunnels of Cleveland, or the lure behind it. Because one of the things that I remember growing up as, hearing as a child, was my dad, my father, me and him, we would pass through downtown Cleveland, and he would point to the Julius Rott House and say, "There is a tunnel there." And he would often tell me that it was a part of the Underground Railroad. Slaves would, apparently be hidden, in the tunnels, and then they would be shot out, mm-hmm. at the train depot below, and therefore escaping into the night. But, I've heard so many different sources on whether they exist or whether they don't. I have heard stories of, I think it was an archaeological group from Lee University. I think it was Lee University. They did some kind of sonar, like by running over the ground. Apparently they didn't find anything in that spot. But I have also heard that in that house, the Julius Rott House, people who have been in that basement have said that it looks like there was something there that has been concreted off, sealed off. And, there is proof that there are tunnels beneath the city of Cleveland. For example, it was discovered right behind, Cleveland or downtown Cleveland's fire department in Inman Street. They found a tunnel system that went beneath the city. Some sources say, it was just runoff, but I find it very odd that these runoff tunnels were so meticulously constructed.
And what water would you be running off from there to there?
Yeah.
So that doesn't make sense to me.
No, it does not. And I mean, it's just and I've also heard stories like this where there was a friend of mine who went to Bradley, and one of the things that she was doing, she was working on a story, a video, I should say, a video with her life group from church, and they were in the basement of a lawyer's office. And one of the things that she would hear while she was doing this little video for her life group is that there was a open tunnel that people used to quote unquote hide in until it was safe to come out. And then I've also heard stories from the older generation. Some of them have said that they would follow these tunnels back when I guess the openings were a little more noticeable. It would take them from one part of Cleveland and shoot them out like an entirely different part of Cleveland. It's just utterly bizarre. And I really wish that, Cleveland would kind of open up about that more, because it's so fascinating, especially with its tie-in with Joyous Rott. Joyous Rott, was the richest man in Cleveland at the time.
State of Tennessee, actually.
In the state of Tennessee, the state of Tennessee.
He was a character that should be revered by
Yes.
Cleveland, Tennessee.
Yes, very much so. Because here's the thing: he was the son of a German appellate court judge. A German appellate court judge.
Was he in Germany? Not a United States appellate court, but Germany.
Germany, and he went to a university in Germany. He studied in mineralogy. He comes to America in 1850, and he becomes a U.S. citizen in 1853.
Moves to Ohio, is that right?
Cincinnati, Ohio is where he winds up because his family is there. He comes down to this area mostly to own and operate the copper mines in Copper Hill and Turtletown.
Now, was he an accountant? Where do I get that impression?
I think probably where it comes from is he did create the Bank of Cleveland. I think it's either the
the First National Bank.
First
Cleveland wasn't the Bank of Cleveland, but it was like
it was a very important bank.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It was something, another bank. But he came down through here to work as a mineral, what do they call it? Mineralogist. Yeah, something like that.
Mineralogist.
And ended up becoming partners with them, ended up owning them.
Yep.
And got extremely rich.
Yep.
It's kind of the story. But
Exactly.
some reason in there, I think he was keeping the books for one of the mining companies and saw a path to, because one was fledgling, I think, and he saw that, looking at the books, that he could make it go. Some story like that. How old do you think Rott was when he came here?
I'm guessing he had to at least be in his mid-20s, is my guess.
You realize that during that era, they called before Rott's time and after Rott's time. That's how important he was to this area. They even coined a decade or two for him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, nobody's ever going to say before Chet Guthrie and after Chet Guthrie.
Yep.
So that's something.
I mean, that exactly. It does say something about this man's character because he played such an important role. And this is another fascinating fact about him is, after the secession of the United States during the Civil War, Rott stayed and he tried his best to keep those mines running, even though they were under, Confederate control. But it eventually turns south when the Confederacy runs them out of town on a rail. Thus, this is where, Rott seeks, asylum in Cincinnati, Ohio with his family. But
how did he leave his fortunes, though? My understanding is they made him leave because they considered him a war criminal because he was making cannonballs and selling cannonballs to the Confederates or something, so they claimed he was a war criminal.
Yep.
I guess he was only a war criminal if he's on the other side, right?
Yep.
Maybe that's how he was keeping things afloat during that period.
Yep. I mean that does make perfect sense because, he also had a copper rolling mill here in Cleveland too, but that was also burned down by the Confederacy, which again,
Now, prior to him bringing the railroad here, they would have teams of horses that brought the copper down the some call it Old Copper Road, right? Isn't that the name of 64 highway at the time?
Yep, was the Old Copper Road.
Old Copper Road. But, and I may have this wrong, but they said it was either 1,200 teams of horses that consisted of 6 horses, or it was 600 teams of horses that consisted of 12 horses. Anyway, they would can you imagine getting a team of horses to come all the way down there?
Mountain.
And that's why because the major place to bring that was taking it out of there was through Blairsville.
Yep.
Or here, and he was instrumental in getting the railroad to stop in Cleveland versus Blairsville.
Yep.
Now think about the difference that could have had for Cleveland. And that's why he had that came here before he bought the house.
Yep. See, the house was constructed by Thomas Callaway in 1861, I believe.
I think so. And he bought it from him. I think he's who he went and partners with to start the bank.
Yep. Yeah, I do believe
I believe that's right. But, if he had an underground railroad, because you went through part of it, right?
Yep.
Part of it's there.
Yep.
So where does it end up? Who knows? It must be true what the legend is. But what would it have been for? It was either for payroll or an underground railroad.
Yep.
What would have been a third option? There wouldn't have been a third option. And if you had payroll coming to your house, you wouldn't have payroll coming to your house.
Yep.
With your family and everything. So the only other option it was an underground railroad.
Yep.
Which makes sense, him coming from Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
More of a non-slavery area.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah, that does definitely, well, like I said, that does fit the bill. All of it's just so fascinating. It's just like I said, and kind of makes me think about a podcast that I saw that the Museum Center at 5 Points does, and I'm like, they're talking about all the things that everybody in Cleveland knows about.
That's what fascinates me about you. That's why I was so interested in you. You talk about the stuff that nobody talks about that everybody would like to know about, but they don't even know about it. It's like they gloss over the other stuff.
Yep.
Is that what you see yourself doing in journalism, the other stuff? I noticed you're not controversial in any way.
Nope. That's my thing is I am objective in what I do. I'm not here to stir the pot, so to speak. I'm just here to tell a story. All I'm here to do.
Do you think that's what true journalism is?
Yes, being objective is, that's, and honestly, that's what I see in today's present journalism. It's like, if you look, CNN is very, very left, Fox is very right, and it's just like, and sometimes, they clash with one another, and I'm just like, this is mainstream news. Why? can I just listen to the stuff that I need to hear and not like, he said, she said, this, this.
Just the facts.
Yes, exactly. But
Do they teach that in journalism school?
I would well, yes. But yes and no. Because when I was a journalism student, you had your professors that did teach with, a very objective, this is what you need to learn in order, to tell a good story. Then you would have some professors that tended to lean, well, a little bit, I don't want to get political, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah. And it's just like, for me, I guess, I'm one of those people, it's like, I don't talk about it, it's like, I have my beliefs and, and what I choose to believe in, it's just like, I really, especially like my present generation, where we're like, breaking into houses and, and it's just like, why? But anyway, for me, as you were saying, I'm just a very objective person. Like, and it kind of goes with, in my storytelling. Because, I feel like I'm kind of being a little bit long-winded there, but...
Where did you get that? Why do you want to tell a story and I don't care to tell a story? What makes you want to tell a story? Or the news? Do you think it's a story or a news you're telling?
A story. Well, in terms of like definition between story and news, are we talking about like facts or what is...
No, you're not telling what happened. You're trying to set the tone of what happened. And that's
Yep.
what I like about your...
Yep.
I mean, you'll show the wind. If you can't hear you good because of the wind, you're out there where it's windy. You're not masking the wind. Sometimes I can't hear you over the water, but that's because you're next to the water.
I mean, because,
It's real.
Yep, it's...
Who's what? Do you have a stick for the camera?
I do. That is what I use. I have a stick and a camera, and it's always me holding this, usually from about here. And from there, I just kind of go for it. Like I do my research before I go out to these locations. This is what, is built up in my mind. This is what has, been done in research. And from there, I build my story.
I've noticed you wear the same jacket a lot.
Oh, the old, well, actually, okay, there is a good reason about that one. That was actually my grandfather's on my mother's side. He passed away back in
I
April.
felt like it was significant for some reason to you.
Well, it was probably because it was my grandfather, again, on my mom's side, who passed away, and he never really got to wear it much before he passed, but, kind of gives me a good feeling that, he's always here with me, even though he's not, the best way to describe it, he's up there, I'm down here, well, not the thing that's below, well, you know what I'm saying. Anyway, I'm not in hell, but...
Is that your armor?
Well...
In a sense?
Kind of in a way.
Now, when you went out to like McFarland, what time did you head out that morning or that afternoon?
I would probably say that I headed out around 9. Had to clean up the truck a little bit. I had to get my stepfather's dog, Sally.
You kept calling it the name of the other.
My mom's dog.
Yeah.
My mom's dog is a border collie.
Did you take that in case bears or snakes?
In a way, yes, because Sally is very unpredictable sometimes. Like, she is very protective, but she is also a very sweet dog. Like, I kid you not. If she does not see you as a threat, she will start licking you, and next thing you know, you'll have about a 50-pound lap dog sitting there with you.
She stayed right with you.
Yep. She's a really, really sweet dog.
Was it a chocolate lab or what?
Black lab.
Black lab. I've got a black lab.
They're super sweet dogs.
The only thing better than a black lab is a chocolate lab.
Yep.
They're a little bit calmer, chocolate lab.
Yep.
Now, so you headed out at 9 o'clock. You had your map with you? Because there's got to be something you've got in preparations besides the camera. Were your juices really flowing that morning when you're going to go out and you're going to you're going to film this.
Yep.
Because you're filming this for all the You're not going to go back the next week and redo it.
Nope.
It's a one take.
It's one take. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm filming. I already have in mind what I want to film and go to. And from there, I do it.
And you don't do many it's either we're going to walk over here and you may cut the camera off. But my sense is when your videos are 15, 20 minutes long, that you're not there much more than 25. You're just getting out of the car and you're filming.
Oh, I mean, sometimes it will be that case, like in terms of some of these locations I am going to, because sometimes they are just in a very, for lack of a better terms, a very sketchy, kind of.
Well, that's what I say about McFarland. You drove 45 minutes to the middle of nowhere.
Yep.
And did you see, where did you park?
I parked right beside the road. That's the turnoff into McFarland, because it's, as a lot of the people who have been there have said before, once you take a vehicle down that road, it better be four-wheel drive, because you're not getting it out if it's not.
Was there any houses where you parked?
None. Like, there was absolutely no house for miles.
Was there enough room on the road to pull over?
Yep. And this just goes to show, the word isn't desolate, but in the amount of time that I was there on that mountain, I only saw about 5 cars, period. And they were all campers, people that were hiking, and that's the only...
They weren't going to the Piggly Wiggly.
No, they were just there to hike, camp out.
So what did you take with you? Did you take, because if you left about 9 o'clock, you're getting up there by the time, you're getting up there 11:30, 12.
Yep.
Do you take lunch with you?
Yeah, occasionally, or sometimes I'll eat out, or...
I mean, when you went on this particular trip.
Yes, I did take my lunch with me.
Because you didn't know.
Yeah, I didn't know how long it was going to take me. I did not know.
Did you just pack water and some sandwiches or something?
Yep, because the thing is, this is where I was a little bit unprepared when I went up there to McFarland. I thought half a tank of gas would be good enough because, it's in Polk County. Even though it's right in the middle of nowhere, it'll still be okay. It's only an hour and a half drive, 2 hours. By the time I get up to the mountain, I'm almost, I'm kind of half between the last quarter tank. And it's once I finally get on the road, driving through the mountains, I kind of see the oil gauge go up.
It goes faster then. You passed Webb Store, you should have got gas there, right?
It was closed for this
Closed?
season.
God. Because that's what you were thinking, right?
Yeah, I was
I'll stop at Webb Store.
I'm going to get there. Then I see crap. I'm just having to gun it, and I'm just having to find somewhere.
Now, when you get there, you could got snake bit,
yep.
Bears.
Yep.
For sure, bears, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you take a gun?
I probably should have. I'm not a licensed carrier, but I do know that my family have a few weapons, that, I could probably keep with me just in case,
But you didn't on this trip.
Nope.
When you got out of your car, how far was it to then walk?
I would probably say to get down to that part of McFarland, it was probably about a 5-minute walk. It's straight down the hill. It really didn't take no more than about 5 minutes.
Of course, when you're walking down the hill in the middle of nowhere, 5 minutes is a pretty good.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good ways.
Yeah, because it's.
Did you take a backpack with you as you went down? If you got snake bit or anything.
Well, honestly, actually, I didn't. That's kind of where I made the mistake on my end because one of the rules of thumb, if you're backpacking or hiking or driving out in the middle of nowhere, mm-hmm. It's best to either have somebody with you or something, that way, say you break your leg and you're stuck there and you're like, well, this is my evening.
People die that way.
Yep.
Because you couldn't have called anybody.
Yep.
Cell phones don't work, obviously, right?
Yes. And when you look at it that way, yes, it is kind of scary because when you're, because if that had happened, like, I skid down, break my leg, I'm sitting by the railroad tracks, the only way that, probably somebody's going to find me, is if that scenic railroad train that comes by once a weekend comes up there and they're like, help me, help. Well, but not.
If you're can you see that structure from the scenic railroad if you were to ride it, I wonder?
Probably.
You might not notice though, right?
Yep. Because how I know this is like the photo that is as the cover photo on my YouTube video. If you look in the back corner, that is the concrete pouring plant. And you got to think before, like, because the land will change like so much in like just alone in 20 years. It like, for example, the Greenway, the north side of the Greenway. I remember when I was a kid, that was nothing but farmland.
You couldn't get through the
I mean, and then, like, I blink and I'm like, there's all this. But anyway, there's a lot of forest. But going back to, yes, if you look in the background, you can see the concrete pouring plant. In like, the Gulf area, there's, like, maybe 1 or 2 houses and what looks to be a mill. But,
was that right where the water was coming off that thing? Does water come off there constantly, I guess?
I would probably say.
Just from the mountains?
Mm-hmm.
Just like it's collecting right there? It's not real clear or nothing like that, right?
Nope.
Now, why don't you wear on that, would you be better to wear like a safari hat or something like that?
Kind of like something, kind of like what you would wear for like hunting gear.
Yeah.
Like a really,
like you were more prepared for the site.
Yeah. Actually, that would probably be a better idea, especially if something did happen to me like that. I have thought about that kind of stuff before, because actually there is a perfect example of this. When it's out in Rockwood, it's called Ozone Falls, and, there is an abandoned fire tower that's on the top of the mountain.
Where's Rockwood?
Rockwood is kind of between Sweetwater and Spring City, Tennessee. It's kind of like sandwiched in there, and there is nothing. Whereas I would say in my southern tonality, there ain't nothing up there.
I think I built a building in Spring City, and I would have to go that back way, and there is nothing there.
Yep.
You come into the back side of Spring City, or it's kind of the west side.
Yep. I mean, again, it's one of those places. There's nothing there. It's so. What is the word? It is not overgrown, but anyway, it's just so. Yeah, I guess the word would be overgrowth, but kind of going back to what I was talking about. I remember I came up and I did a vlog in that area, and this was December of last year when we had that really good cold spell. Mm-hmm. And when I got down there was nothing but ice that I assumed was snow. Mm-hmm. I take one step, I slip, I fall, I say, oh crap, only I didn't say oh crap, and that goes into the YouTube video. And I'm like, I can't go any farther than this. And that kind of goes back to what you were talking about, the risks that go into going into some of these places.
Even going under that tunnel of rods.
Yep.
I mean, you went back in there. Mm-hmm. That's somewhat dangerous.
Yep. But my thing is, it's just, I guess how I feel is, if there is something like that, do not do it unless you are experienced. You have a familiarity with the area. Mm-hmm. You know how it's constructed. And of course, bringing a weapon or, something as some form of protection when you're down there or going to some of these places. Like, I know this is going to sound pretty bad, but I was kind of thinking about doing a video on the Cherokee Summit, hotel. Recently they moved all the destitute.
Yeah.
And I was up there, and I was just kind of walking, looking around, and I saw that one of these doors was open, and I was like, I wonder if that is unlocked. I tapped the handle, it's open. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to close that and pretend that I did not do that. Mm-hmm. And, but, I guess why I say that is, of course, going back to the whole dangerous thing, is, at one point, the Cherokee Summit, hotel was, not, the word is not royalty. It was practically a 4-star hotel. It was really nice. It's where a lot of the wealthy would come and stay if they were in Cleveland. Over the course, of like the next 50, 60 years, it becomes, a home for, people that are destitute or homeless, and it kind of loses its charm. Well, my thinking is I would kind of like to go in there, before they do their renovations on it and capture what it, was, what it almost looked like back then.
It's almost imperative, isn't it?
Yep. That way people do not forget and they know something that the rest of the world, the rest of the world never saw until, it finally got renovated.
I remember seeing old pictures of people standing in front of it. I mean, it was a place where they had weddings and...
Yep. I mean, it was a beautiful, beautiful building. Like, if you look at postcards, the lobby is just gorgeous. And when I was up there, I walked up the stairs, I wanted to look in. And yes, it kind of looked like a government facility, but at the time, I could only look and imagine, the drapes hanging, the beautiful, pieces of furniture.
The big columns.
Yep, the furniture, the really nice, luggage desk, in a way, I mean, I kind of felt like, I was taking a trip back in time to, when Cleveland was, downtown Cleveland, wasn't, a few...
Where Inman Street was bringing everybody through there rather than I-75.
Yep.
All due to rot.
Yep, exactly.
I would like to, for somebody's research, and I don't know how you can do it, but the stagecoach route that came through Cleveland, where it was going.
And, kind of like where it went through, like, kind of like the Appalachian, well, yeah.
Well, I mean, where was the stagecoach stops?
Now, that would be an interesting video. That would be very interesting.
And you can't hardly find the information. You can Google it, stagecoach. There's a theory that the stagecoach routes and stops precluded the mail postal route. And then there's other thoughts that the stagecoach came after the mail routes were established. So I don't know which came first.
That is a thought.
I don't know.
I mean, because that would be an interesting. Well, I mean, I do know a little bit of history. Well, not so much the trail history that runs through Cleveland, but my stepfather's property that he's got up in Dunlap. Part of the the wagon train used to
Cagle.
Yep.
Cagle, yeah.
Yep. Used to run through that area.
Well, I built a doctor's office in Grootley Logger, Tennessee.
Yeah.
Now that's the middle of nowhere. But I asked the local people there how it came about, and they said that was a major stagecoach stop back in the day, and that a lot of Germans came there to work in the mines, and that's how they got the Dutch-made bakeries that were up there and down in Tracy City. So stagecoach stops and routes were a major thing.
Yep.
But we don't know a thing about them. I think Taylor Springs was where they would stop at the top of the hill, and they would walk down and get water from the spring, or they'd take water back up to them. So I think they were stopping at what we would call Inman Street.
Yep.
I guess. I don't know. I don't know how you'd find that. That's your expertise, not mine, right?
I think probably where you could find it. The only thing that I guess that's ringing a bell in my mind is perhaps you could probably find it at, Bradley County Library. You could, you know what? Actually, there's another good thing where you could probably look. Archives, at the Bradley County Courthouse.
In the basement?
Yep, going through old archives, looking at old newspaper articles. I guess how I know that, or why the thought came to mind is back when I was an intern at the Cleveland Daily Banner, I did a story on my family's property, and I remember it published, and like that morning that's another story for Alan Jones. But anyway, basically, essentially what happened is my mentor at the time called me and said, Alan Jones called me and he said he really liked your article. And then
That's an honor, isn't it?
Yep. And later that day, I walked into work and for my internship, and she goes, when she first found out that Alan Jones was wanting to speak to her, she's like, "Oh crap, what did he do?" But going back to, that's another thing that you could probably look at, looking at old archives, the public library, even quite possibly, the library that's, where the Craig Miles family lived. They've got a lot of stuff, a lot of old maps.
What about the Craig Miles diary? Are you familiar with that?
Craig Miles?
Or not the Craig Miles.
The mausoleum?
The diary, the Civil War diaries.
Civil War diaries. It's not ringing a bell, but...
It's a girl that wrote a diary during the Civil War from around here. I can't remember exactly. Maybe the Hardwicks or maybe even the Callaways. So I need to get that book. I can't remember if I'm remembering it right, but...
that's kind of where I'm trying to think of.
What is it about history and all this that makes you
interested?
Well, you could do a documentary or a thing on the homeless.
Yeah.
Would that interest you, or is it more history and mystery?
I lean a little more on history and mystery, but at the same time, I am curious, about the homeless, and something in terms like that, because, people, you see a homeless man on the street, you're kind of thinking, oh, he's just a bum, he's asking for money. But if you think about it, a lot of these homeless people, they share, they have a story, sometimes a student, that was in college, didn't necessarily have anything, and eventually, they couldn't pay their student loans, wound up on the street, somebody that was really strung out on drugs. I know at one point, speaking of homeless, I know there was a point when after I graduated from UT, I was so stubborn on trying to get a job in that market, and it came to a point where I was practically sleeping in my truck every night after work.
Where at?
Where I would sleep at is after work. Usually it was after 6.
In Chattanooga?
Oh, no. This Knoxville.
Knoxville.
I would pull into where this Walmart is that's just not even 2 minutes away. And my truck, it's got a kind of like a hatchback. And what I would do is I would pull out my military style sleeping bag, and I would just close myself in and fall asleep.
Did you feel safe?
No. And again, that's kind of why I came to a point where it's I can't do this anymore.
Now, it wasn't that your family put you out or that you didn't have anywhere to go. You were more of a stubborn homeless. Does that make sense?
Yes, I was gritting my teeth and trying to make my dream happen, and there were ramifications for that. I was sleeping in my truck. I would come back home after about an hour, from an hour and a half from Knoxville to here. And I'd get a shower, I'd clean up, and I'd go back to work again. And I would do that for about 3 or 4 days, come back and do it again. And like I said, I realized, I'm 26 years old. I can't be beating myself up like this. I want a family. I want to live. I can't do this anymore. So I had to give up the dream in Knoxville, and I came back to Cleveland, and that is where the genesis of the sailboat story started.
What were you doing in Knoxville?
Honestly, I was working at Cookout, the Cumberland or the Cookout on Cumberland Avenue. Very busy for a fast food, well, a fast food joint. It paid pretty well, but it's because it's right next to the University of Tennessee. You have a lot of students, that are coming through there, especially like on game days, when whether you're a fan of the Vols or not. Yeah. When it's not, it wasn't a good day when the Vols lost. I'll say that much. We'd get a lot of college kids that had had a few too many drinks, and yeah, not fun. Not fun.
Do you see yourself as a or remember Geraldo Rivera when he was in front of that place where they kept the military people? That what was the name? When he made his mark.
Yep.
What was that place?
I can't really.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
He did that story. He broke the story, and it made him famous, and he's still on TV today. Basically, that's the only thing he did.
Yep.
To my knowledge. But is that what you see yourself, standing in front of the shots at Vietnam giving a report?
I would not say to that extent. I mean, I like to be in front of the camera, walk with it. Although, I mean, I probably could do, the standard broadcast style journalist or multi-skilled journalist where you're standing out in front of a camera and, you're just talking. But in terms of that, I do see myself more as kind of just being with the camera, not really I'm choosing a shot of frame where it's right here to about. No, that's probably going to cause some sound issues. I'm sorry. Anyway, about from here to here, rather than the standard broadcast, mid frame, down to the waist, up here, big.
Are you thinking of these things while you're filming?
Yes. Like, I mean, I'm like, again, that's kind of like, I guess, where my video production mind comes from. I'm constantly thinking where this frame of view will come in, but it is always on my mind.
Is your stick adjustable?
Mm-hmm.
Will you have it shorter when you're talking about Monk and longer when you're talking about McFarland, or you have it a standard length away?
Standard length. I mean, just
to go like this.
Yep. Yes, that way the audio is good because I do not have a big giant, boom mic,
So it's all the camera, just that phone. Is it literally your phone?
Actually, it is a GoPro Hero 7. And it's with that little camera. By the way, they might be a small camera. GoPro has produced a style camera that it's easy, it's portable. You can pop it right out of your pocket. There you go.
Why not just use your phone? Is it better?
Look how dark it is.
Oh,
and
it's cracked too.
Yes.
So when you take a picture of the ground, or you're taking a picture of the water, like the Chitata wall.
Shade, yeah.
You took a picture of the ground. How are you doing that GoPro then?
Well, I mean, really what I do is, for example, I'll get down kind of shin height, and I'll kind of walk with the camera.
Would you turn it around?
Yep.
But I never see your hand going like this.
Oh, in terms of that, what I'll do is I'll edit it. I will cut that specifically out. That way it fits into frame.
What do you use to edit?
I use an editing software that is HitFilm. HitFilm is a free software. Well, there are other upgrades to it. You've got a $20, $50, or $100. I just use a standard free.
Could I take this video and edit out our coffee break?
Yeah.
Does it take a long time?
Honestly, with kind of how I plan my videos, I could probably take maybe about an hour's worth of footage and get it down to about only having to take like an hour, hour and a half, which in terms of like editing, if you know, I mean, editing can be, editing can be absolutely atrocious.
Yeah, I've used that Studio Pro or something like that, and it's very hard to do. I quit. I gave up. But you use Hit Pro?
Hit Film, Premiere, Hit Film. Another one that is actually, well, it might cut out on you. Adobe Premiere is also another really good one. But like I said, sometimes the system will crash on you and give you some bullcrap answer, and you're just sitting there at the computer after losing like 2 hours worth of work, and you're just like, I'm going to walk outside and I'm going to scream. And then but anyway.
So you take this out, like at McFarland, was you up there a whole hour?
I would probably say, well, in the total time that I was there, I would probably say I was about there. Yeah, about 2 hours. I was down in the concrete pouring site, and then I went down to the where McFarland was.
Trying to film as much as you can?
Yeah, all structures, all foundations, anything that I can find. Essentially, kind of trying to, not to sound mean about it, but kind of try to outdo the people that came before. People are, just took out, just a really beat up phone or something like that and be like, this is this is that, and it just looks so bad that you sit there and you have to turn it off. For me, that's kind of what I do, as well, is I will go in after I watch some people, make a video on it or something, and it just looks horrible. It just looks bad. And my goal is to make something that the viewer, the fan, the member can enjoy, instead of just like a really, really wobbly phone. That's. I bet you're probably going to have a lot of meme things here, Dee. I'm a very funny individual. But anyway, I guess, where was I going with that?
Where is do you have a list of other stuff you're going to do? Do you write it down, or do you just kind of have it in your head?
I have it in my head, but I can tell you some of the things that you should be looking forward to. The next one, of course, I'm doing the old primitive settlement. Probably the next one will probably be the Laurel Snow Falls, the Laurel Snow Falls Pocket Wilderness. All that used to be a mining town. Well, not mining town.
Where's that at?
The Laurel Snow Falls State Pocket Wilderness area is in Dayton, Tennessee. And what it was during, I think it was like the 1880s, 1890s, they were saying that it was going to be the next Steel USA. They were going into these mountains and they were pulling out coal. They were going to take it, they were going to, build these coke ovens, get the coal, then take the iron, the steel, and, send it out. But in that area, they simply could not get enough coal. And another reason why mining stopped in that area, what became of the Laurel Snow Pocket Wilderness, is that there was a mining disaster that killed about 30 men. And they did try to get them out, but how they did this is I believe this was the Richland mine, but they went and they dug beneath the mine. They went beneath the river to where it had collapsed, and by the time that they had gotten to the men, they were all dead. That is another place. And plus, another cool thing about that area is you can find a lot of evidence where the trains used to run through, a lot of old train trestles, a lot of old bridges. It's really cool. And the next place that I do plan on going is, I've never seen like a comprehensive video on it, but that's the general, the Great Locomotive Trace. The Great Locomotive Chase, happened in 1862, I believe, Andrews Raiders. On YouTube, I cannot find for the life of me a comprehensive video that expands, that particular event in history. because it's like, especially with us being not even far from Chattanooga, Ringgold, and even Atlanta, you know, Chattanooga, plays a role in the general. I think it's the 1950s that there was that really big court battle. Who was going to get possession of the general? Was it going to be Chattanooga or Atlanta? And from there, you also, Ringgold, down Ringgold, Georgia, you've got the monument of the, where it was captured. And then if you go further, you've got the Railroad Museum near Atlanta, or in Big Shanty, Georgia. They've got the train there. And they do have a big sign, from where the hotel was, where Andrew and his raiders, the 22 Union soldiers, that's where they took over, they took over the general, and they just went, even though when I say went, it was only like 15 miles an hour. That's what I was reading. People in history make it sound like the general's going like 45, 50 miles an hour. No. Andrew and his raiders, that train was only going about 15 miles an hour. It was slow.
But you couldn't stop it either, right?
No, this was a big...
Cut a tree.
Yep. This was about a 40-ton piece of equipment. It's not going anywhere. But going back to what I was saying, it's, nobody has done a video on it that, comprises of all those locations, all those spots, or even, the relation between the Texas and the general, because, the conductor of the general, he went, he goes on this chase for the general, and they do...
He may be the hero in this thing, right?
Yep.
If I remember correctly.
Yep. He took possession of the Texas, and from there, it was a showdown between these two big steam-breathing giants. Now, the Texas is in the Atlanta History Center, which is only like maybe 30 minutes away from the museum in Big Shanty. What I would like to do is pull that all together in a big video. That way, generations down the road, all they got to do, click it in, look at this, click. That way, future generations know the story of the general and these locations.
You have a real passion for this.
Yep. Actually,
have you ever thought about doing the Henniger House? Remember where they stopped the Civil War or something? I don't even really know the story.
Yep.
I've just heard that.
Yep.
I've heard the Henniger House my whole life and don't really know what it's. So that would be a good.
That's an.
You would think. I was thinking this morning, you could run out of these things, but you couldn't. If you did one a week, by the time you got done, you'd have something else that had happened.
Yep. Or have about 100,000 subscribers.
Yeah, and you've got all this area around here. Any place that's 25 minutes away is local, isn't it?
Yep.
20 minutes, 25 minutes is local.
Yep. Well,
what is it about history that you think we can learn? Are you telling these stories as factual as you can, setting the tone so that we know? But what's the end game? Is it to help us to not repeat history, or is it just an interesting entertainment type thing, or is it what is it?
Actually, I can answer that pretty well. Initially, why I started making videos like this was to, keep, that mechanical part of my brain going, creating content, to show to an employer, hopefully get a job, and, keep doing what I'm passionate about. But since this is going on year 3 and I haven't had that many interviews, which just boggles my mind because, I've got a channel with close to 500 subs now.
Yeah.
It really nowadays comes down to, well, the historical gain, I wouldn't say to repeat it, but rather to entertain and inform. Again, kind of circles around, to what we were talking about earlier. It's like, I want to cover things that people don't know about, that, a lot of the mainstream, especially here in Cleveland, like the podcasts that, 5 Points does. I'm not bashing them. I do like Museum Center and 5 Points. But it's like all these sources always talk about the same thing. Same thing. I can't take it. I can't. aggravates me. But anyway, I digress on that.
Instead of Paul Harvey used to say, and now for the rest of the story, you're saying, and now for the other story.
Yep.
The whole other one.
Yep. The side of history that, is just so, overlooked, but yet it is so fascinating. Like, did you know, actually, this is a good example, like a really good example. Did you know that there is a connection between the Warren family and Cleveland, Tennessee?
Don't even know who the Warren family is.
The Warren family is the paranormal investigators that the Conjuring series is based on. The Conjuring universe, multi-billion-dollar industry. Well, how our connection as Cleveland, Tennessee is attached to that family, or such a prominent,
Are they on TV?
They did have a cable access show way back in the 70s and the 80s. But I guess to give a little more history about Ed and Lorraine Warren, they are some of the most prolific paranormal investigators in the entire United States. They're the ones who got that going, and so to speak. For example, a lot of their stories, kind of what we have seen, in the movies. If you're a really big horror fan, a really big horror film fan. They were a very fascinating group of people, but how we have a connection with them is we look back on a little dirt road that goes, a little dirt road. This is back in 1966. This is long before that I-75 is even constructed. Most of that area in Cleveland, where you see the Cleveland Daily Banner, the Old Fort Restaurant, none of that is there. You have nothing but farmland, mainly my great-great-grandfather. And on this land, and there was this older lady, her family buys a house in a newly formed neighborhood called Vista Drive. And this house is about the only house in the entire area. It's a dirt road, goes off into nowhere, turns around and comes back. Well, one of the things that the former owner of this house says to this lady's mother at the time, he says, "Congrats, you bought yourself a haunted house."
Now this is before 25th Street.
Yeah, this was all before.
So Vista Drive was a subdivision before.
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
Kind of like where you see, kind of like that road that, that was it, that comes out right beside, the cheat sheet to go to Cracker Barrel, as my family calls it. But anyway, we...
Guthrie Drive.
Guthrie Drive. That, again, that's, if you look at James Asbury or... Crap, I feel bad because I'm forgetting my great-grandmother's name. That, again, that's Guthrie Street, Guthrie Drive. That's all my family... was my family's former property. But to go back to the story, for a while at the beginning, this lady was confused. Why did the former owner of this house say this to her mother? Not long after they began to live in this house, strange things would begin to occur. They would see things get thrown across the room. They would see what they quoted as shadow figures in the corner. They'd hear these really mysterious voices. A lot of strange things were happening, whether you believe the paranormal or not. Well, it hits its boiling point. They really can't take it anymore. They're really trying to seek out some kind of confirmation. So, mid-1970s, Ed and Lorraine Warren, they were giving a lecture at Cleveland State Community College, and you can find this in old records of the Cleveland Daily Banner. Rick Norton was the one who interviewed them. Good old Rick.
Rick Norton.
Yep, he was. I believe he's the main director, the director at the Banner. I mean, he's been around for forever. But anyway, this lady, she comes up to Lorraine Warren after the presentation is over, and she tells Lorraine Warren exactly what's going on. And Lorraine looks at her and says, "You all need to get off that property. That house has a lot of negativity. There's a lot of negativity in that area." And as I'm hearing this story and I'm reading about it, this lady is telling me, I'm like, why don't we know about this? And she told me that just about every house in this neighborhood had some kind of activity to it. And this is kind of one of the things that, in my assumption, that I can think of, is that way back when, before European settlement, probably even predating the Cherokee Nation, you would have a lot of these Native American tribes, that would consider some places sacred or mystical, magical. Some would say there's portals, or it would take them somewhere that was otherworldly. But kind of reminds me about one of the things that I had heard while working at Ghost Augustine. You see, St. Augustine, Florida, before the settlements of the Spanish, my apologies on that. The Timucuan Indians, they considered all that area some kind of magical, what they described, there was an energy to it. But going back to this area, that's kind of what I think what happened. Prior to the Cherokee or the Cherokee themselves, this land that these houses sit on now.
It was kind of in a valley.
Yep.
Where the Indians.
Yep.
Settled generally.
Yep. And that's kind of the thing that I was telling you about is.
So the Warrens were here. That was the only connection, but that she advised this lady of that?
Yep.
Do you think that what about the paranormal? I mean, in St. Augustine, is there something out there that we don't understand? Would you say that?
Yes.
How do you think it's connected to God?
I think, honestly, I wonder if maybe there is some reason that we don't cross over into heaven. Like, maybe there's a reason, that we stay behind. And why I want, or there's some kind, it's just like a gray area. Because how I feel about this is when my great-grandmother passed away on my mother's side, she died of stage 4 cancer. She fought it for about a year, but when she passed away, we did not feel like we lost somebody. I know that sounds kind of crazy. We felt like she was still there. And throughout the next few years, we would notice that really, really weird things would happen. For example, my sister, this was when she was 2 years old. She had gotten double pneumonia and she was in the hospital. And my mom was holding her, trying to get her to calm down. Well, she kept on crying, and she was saying, "I want my nanny, I want my nanny." She was pointing to this corner of the room. My nanny passed away in 1997. That happened in 2005, I believe. So I do honestly believe there is some sort of gray area. I do believe, if you are a God-fearing Christian, you will go to heaven. There is proof of an afterlife that is out here. Because that's another fascinating thing. You hear people that have, been declared, clinically dead, and they will come back and they will tell you there is something,
And I've read those stories, and they it may not be true, but those people believe it's true.
Yep.
I can tell that.
Yep.
Like that guy, 90 Minutes in Heaven.
Yep.
Boy, that guy believed it was. He believed it.
Yep. But like I said, that's kind of in the paranormal. I don't touch that stuff anymore just because you don't want to mess with that stuff. Even in terms of the tourism industry, no.
When you were in St. Augustine, that was where a lot of ghosts were supposed to be, right?
Yep.
Can you truthfully say that there's something strange there?
And why I say that is when I would give these tours, Dee, they would take pictures of these spots and there would be nothing there, but you could clearly see the silhouette of a person, not fog, nothing. You could clearly see the silhouette of a person standing right there. And I don't know how to describe it. I've seen people take photos in the cemetery. Nothing's there. When you hit the flash and everything, when you see the camera, there's something standing right in front of us.
Now, the Indians that were here before us, they didn't deny it. They just embraced it, didn't they?
Yes. I mean,
now the story of the monk with the train coming down the track, you can see it. I've wondered. I've never heard anybody say that. I wonder if there's anybody in Charleston that can
prove it.
That can say yes. I've seen that train.
You know, that would be an issue, because there is actually an interesting story in that. Because when I was down there filming it, I asked one of the locals there. He was driving around in his truck. They were actually working on a water vein there. And he told me the only thing that he could say me, and he said it with a straight face, he says, yes, I've seen it. And kind of, yeah, honestly, I would like to hear the accounts, is it more than just a ghost story, or is it just,
Or is it a glimpse?
Yeah, I mean, it's like...
I mean, if I see something, I know I see it.
Yep.
There's no question.
Yeah.
Of course, they'd have to stop me in Chattanooga. That's how far I'd run before I'd slow down.
Yeah, yep.
If I saw something like that.
Yep. I mean, trust me, it will freak you out. Like, some of these photos that, tourists would take, I'm surprised I stayed at that job as long as I did. Like, I've seen some really, really weird photos. But I've seen a photo of somebody standing in a window. You can clearly see, their image.
I mean, that's where people go to see that, right? I mean,
Yep.
It's not like... That's different than Charleston. That's the place where you're supposed to...
Yep. I mean, again... Oh.
Should you call your show History and Mysteries? Histories and Mysteries? Why the Dream Poet?
Okay, then that's another interesting story, how Dream Poet has become the moniker of that. How Dream Poet has come to be is originally I used to write a lot of poetry for a blog of mine, or a lot of short stories, a lot of photos is what I initially started with. But as I would branch out and do other things, I just kind of kept that name. But now that I think about it, there is,
It fits, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it fits.
There is a type of symbolism there, dream, dreams, living life, doing what you want to do, and poet, living it in the in a creative manner.
You use the word symbolism.
Yep.
Is that another word for poetry, poems?
Yes. So
I've never heard anybody refer to it as that. I mean, I know art.
Yep.
Poetry is art. I guess art is symbolism. I've never heard anybody say that.
I mean, but now that you mention it, I have thought about kind of changing the moniker a bit, because, you've got my photo where, actually I had an illustrator make that for me. You've got an oarfish that goes this way, and then you've got a humpback whale going this way. One is kind of like almost like with the sailor's cross in the middle. How I always like to think of it is the humpback whale, is a symbol of intelligence, wisdom, the surface. An oarfish is a mysterious fish that really mankind has yet to figure out. They videoed them, they usually swim in this direction, in really deep depths. They're a beautiful fish, but they're just so misunderstood, yet we have so little, we have so much to uncover. So really, in a way, the Christian symbol, a whale, the surface, the intelligent, the history books, as if you will, the history as if you will call it, and
the mystery.
Yes, the split. But yes, that is kind of my symbolism there.
Is poetry supposed to tell a story? Poet.
Yep, I mean...
Poet. Supposed to be telling a story in a rhythmic way, I guess, right? So.
Yep. I mean, that's...
I don't think I'd change what I'm doing, because you seem to be successful at it.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm talking for like the first 2 years that I went out on my, a limb to create my channel, I wasn't getting anything. Like, I mean, it was just so hard to keep putting things out, getting no, comment or really negative comments. I mean, to nowadays, I mean, I read these things and I'm just like, I hate you so much. Make a funny comment.
Yeah, I've had people say stuff online. You wouldn't hear all the stuff I hear. My friends.
Yeah, it's just like, deep down, you're just like, I hate you all so much. But anyway.
I think I would just keep doing exactly like I'm doing, because it seems to be working for you. You're enjoying it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yep.
Gwen said you've had 12 more subscribers since he's been watching it. So I don't know.
Okay then. But anyway, actually, since we were kind of talking about it, I know I didn't cover on it as much, but the Shady Valley or the Shady Wall.
Yeah.
I got to tell you about how much in trouble I got with the mispronunciation of that name. How I know this is, my friend Nathan King and John Galley, the ones who, discovered a portion of the wall, I was calling it what they were calling it, Chitata, because that's what, when you look at the signs, it's just
Chitata.
like, yeah.
That's how it's spelled.
Yep, but you listen to a lot of these locals, they will tell you, no, it's Chatta, or no, it's Shady, and it's like, why am I doing it wrong? But anyway, I remember because I told my father about it, the video I was working on at the time, and he was going, oh, you're talking about Shady. It took him like 5 minutes. And I was like,
I always call it Chatta.
Yeah.
Now, where does that wall, where do you think it ends, that you can tell?
Well, from where you can see, like on old records, old maps, it's described as a wall that's about 7 miles away from Charleston, Tennessee. 7 miles away, and it is facing it's faced on a ridge north and south leading up to the Hiwassee River. And
North and south.
Yep.
So here's the Hiwassee River. It's going like this. I always thought it was going. What was the wall for?
That is a total mystery to mankind, because this is where we'll elaborate on the history of it. In 1891, you have Isaac Cooper. He's trying to find stones for his mill. He's trying to build it. He comes across this mysterious wall. It's 2.5 feet thick. It's 3 ply high of these, sandstones. 1, 2, 3. One side of the wall has these mysterious etchings in it that he can't really describe. There is a professor, well, not a professor, he is sent by the Smithsonian Institution. I forgot his name, but anyway, it's not A.L. Rawson, because A.L. Rawson comes into the picture later.
Maybe Perry, something like that.
Something like that. He doesn't, he kind of like just pins it off as, being a natural formation, just kind of goes about his way. But A.L. Rawson, who, he is staying the night in a hotel in Cleveland, Tennessee, and he hears the story of this mysterious wall with these mysterious etchings. So he stays another night or two. He comes out to the wall and he sees it. This is where he spends $35,000. In this $35,000, it invests in excavators and people who know how to decipher old hieroglyphics. He takes a part of the stone and he sends it up to a research facility. I think it was in Harvard is where they sent. It was one of the universities up north. And what they found out, what they believed in that stone, it looked like a Paleo-Hebrew. Well,
Paleo-Hebrew. That's interesting.
Yep, Paleo-Hebrew. This is kind of where
Hebrew is what Jesus' language was, right?
Yep. And why they say this is, during the time, they believed, that this could possibly be where the lost tribe of Israel wound up at. But then again, this is where the controversies happen. This is where people say Isaac Cooper's a fraud, or they say it's a natural rock formation, and people are just going left and right, until finally they just cease. Isaac Cooper just reburies the wall because there's just so many people that are coming out to it. People are taking from it. and people don't really hear much from it anymore. And there was a part of the stone or the wall that was in the Smithsonian Institution from about 1900 to 1902. And the reason that they took it out was because they questioned its authenticity. They were not sure if it was real or not. But again, it's a very fascinating piece of history that Cleveland does not know about. And
I mean, it was shown on the map that you had.
yep, Chautauqua Valley or Shady Valley.
What did it call it on the map?
Well, it was from what I could figure out. It was in the Hooper Farm area. Hooper Farm is where allegedly Isaac Hooper found it, was on his property. Hooper Farm, the thing that it is now, it is one big subdivision. One big, giant subdivision, that's all it is. How I figured out Shady Valley is because you read some of the newspapers, like, the Cleveland Herald, I think it's the Cleveland Daily Herald, I think it was the precursor to the Cleveland Daily Banner. And that's where they described it in reading in old articles, that it was in the Chautauqua Valley. Chautauqua Valley still shows up on a map. Well, for the locals, Chatta or Shady, because I don't want to get hit with that again.
But wasn't that Rattlesnake Springs, what they called Rattlesnake Springs?
Yep.
Where the Indians settled before they got on the boats?
Yep, Rattlesnake Springs.
But what you're saying is that the wall was there prior to that.
Yep. And again,
it could be the Vikings.
Yep, it could even be them. There are examples of this, like in western North Carolina. You've got Judicola Rock. Well, as the Cherokee pronounce it, as Jucola. In Judicola Rock, it is this big soapstone with all these, engravings of it. And now that is on a national, register.
Well, who did those engravings?
They believe that it was the Cherokee. Or some people believe it to be the Cherokee because it looks like, some people believe it to be a map. Some historians, if you look at it, there is a big, giant curve that comes through it. Well, not a curve, kind of like this really weird wobbly line. And you see all these dots. Some historians believe that all these dots in this giant line was the river in the western North Carolina area, and all these dots were different villages in the surrounding area.
And they're sort of pointed on that map, which would sort of say TP Village something, maybe.
Yep.
You notice that? They're sort of pointed?
Yep. I mean, I did notice that, granted, Cherokee, often their villages where, they were set, they were kind of like what you'd see, like, these big, you've got
maybe they were to keep horses in or cattle.
Quite possibly.
Will you do updates on if any new information comes out on the stuff that you've done, like in a year update?
Yep.
McFarland, if there's new information comes out or something, or maybe you find some new pictures.
Yep.
Are you a historian or a journalist?
That is a ringer, because I wonder that one. Have I become the historian or have I become a journalist? In a way, if you think about it, journalists are, well, this was for a long time. Journalists nowadays have become, it's just become so polarized. But my thoughts on that is that journalists, were the ones who first captured that first glimpse of the event as it happened. Historians will go over and cover it like 100 years down the road or 20 years down the road. But in a way, I don't want to give the ambiguous answer that I'm both.
So you're saying it's really two different things.
Yeah.
Historian talks about occurrences and events of the past. A journalist talks about it as it's unfolding.
Yep.
Good point. So you could say you're a journalist / historian.
Yep. I mean, yeah, that would make that kind of sums it up, really. That's probably how I would describe myself as, yeah, that's how I would describe myself as, because it's like, I love telling, current stories, and I love, it's just like it's so fascinating. Kind of like, actually, this reminds me of what I did when I was in Florida. I went to, granted, this was more true crime related, but Eileen Wuornos, the first, female serial killer in the United States. Orlando, well, not in Orlando, Daytona Beach, Florida.
Man killer or something they called her.
Yep, killed 7 men along Florida's highways. But what I did is I went to the hotel that her and her girlfriend, what was her girlfriend's name? That they stayed in, and the bar, which she used to frequent a lot, is not even like 2 minutes away. So what I did is I walked from the bar and I walked to the hotel, and I filmed a pretty cool vlog on it. But what I was trying to do when I went down in that spot is I was trying to get the same room that Eileen Wuornos stayed in. That is also something you can do. I don't know, maybe that's just me being a little bit weird. It's just being the true crime nerd in me. It's like, actually, scratch that. That's a little bit on the macabre. But anyway.
That would interest me.
I mean.
Just to, I don't know. Just to
say, I guess maybe it's like bragging rights to say I stayed in the same hotel room as a famous.
Well, I want to think. What were they thinking? What were they seeing?
Yep, exactly. Because you got to think, Eileen Wuornos. Who's to say, she got done killing a guy. She's covered in blood. Her girlfriend's laying on the bed, kind of, just watching TV. She goes to the bathroom, same, she just washed off all the blood. Like, that to me is just like, that is so cool. Well, it sounds morbid, but at the same time, it's kind of cool.
Well, it's just a mystery.
Yep.
It's another mystery.
Yep. And anyway, I'm trying to think of maybe another couple of things that are in what I'm doing right now. Any more questions?
I'll say one thing. You're a really neat guy.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you, because I'm glad that finally, with the advent of YouTube and all this other stuff, I am finally doing what I want to do. And finally, my YouTube channel is building, even though I still haven't made a dime off of it.
Well, I have a funny feeling that you're not finished.
Nope, not by. Thank you.